well. Let's welcome back our co-hosts on this terrific Thursday morning. He is a Vietnam War veteran, former Deputy Revenue Secretary, member of the House of Delegates for 26 years, though not continuously, Mr. John Doyle.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, John. That was a rather subdued good morning for you.
It was?
Yeah.
It was.
Good morning, everybody.
Even Mr. Kearns was
Wow.
looking at you.
I was just shocked that he had stopped.
He just got to stop. Yeah.
Just, good morning.
That voice belongs to Mr. Bill Kearns. He's also on the short timers list for retiring soon.
Yeah, actually, I've already retired,
Kind of.
and we have actually hired someone to take over the CFO position. Though I'm not going to mention the name, so don't ask me.
Is it somebody I know?
No, probably not.
Then why would we bother asking you if we don't know the person?
But looking forward to them getting trained, and I'll be able to transition out.
When do you think you'll be completely
Hopefully
out?
by the end of the year.
No kidding.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good for
Congratulations.
Yeah, I have 2 grandsons now, so I'll be popsy duty a little bit more.
Take care of your grandchildren and your flock. Mr. Kearns is also a minister.
Yeah, I enjoy doing things at the church, and we actually had Pastor Tim there last Sunday, so he was there for presenting about the rescue mission as they're one of our missionaries at the church.
We had him on yesterday.
Yeah.
He is a force of nature.
He is.
Yeah. Great guy. Via telephone, Delegate Clay Riley joins us. He is the Vice Chair of Finance in the House of Delegates. Clay, good morning. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Good morning, Rob. Good morning, John and Bill. And
Good
I
morning.
agree, Rob, that was pretty subdued for John Doyle.
See?
He doesn't have coffee in front of him.
Well, no, I've had my coffee for the day. That is, if there's an explanation, that ain't it.
Well, maybe the last segment just wore him out.
Awesome. Clay, there is a rumor that when Mr. Doyle was in the House of Delegates, no matter where he was in the House, you could hear him.
Yeah, that's not a rumor. that's fact.
That is awesome. Clay, let's talk August revenue numbers and how the year is stacking up to this point. I understand that we came in slightly below estimates in August.
Yeah, for the month we came in slightly below. I think it was about $4 million or so below the estimates. Essentially, it's 4.9. But essentially, I mean, when you're talking about $400 million, that's pretty close. I mean, you're less than 1%, right around 1%. So, but for the year, we are over the official estimate by about $17 million. So typically during the month of August, you see the severance tax sort of fluctuate. I think last year we were down in severance tax. This month we were down in severance tax. If you go back to 23, we were up in severance tax for August. It's a little bit of a weird month on severance tax. And so when you look at the detail for the month, we were ahead of estimates on personal income tax. We were ahead of estimates on sales tax. The difference was really the severance tax, which was under estimates by about $22 million. And then the day after, on September 2nd, we get an $18 million payment of severance tax. So a lot of that comes into timing with the severance tax in August.
Yeah, I'm told by those of you who know this stuff that the tax revenues to pay most attention to are sales tax revenues and income tax revenues, and both of those were above estimate.
Yeah, those are really the two. I mean, when you look at them combined, they're about 80% of the total revenue that we talk about. And we talk about the general revenue budget, which this year is $5.323 billion, I guess. So when you look at it, those are about 80% combined, and that's really where you want to focus. I mean, the severance tax runs around 8-ish% of our revenues and corporate net, somewhere around 5%. So, but when you look at them, you really want to pay attention to where's our PIT and where's our sales tax.
I understand that Governor Morrissey does a more realistic projection of revenues than Governor Justice did.
I don't know that I would categorize it as that. I think it's just a perspective of where they think they want to be from a budgetary perspective, and where they think the revenues actually will come in. I mean, last year we came in $254 million at the end of the fiscal year ahead. When Governor Morrissey came in, there were some things that he wanted to include for some out years that was just handled a little bit differently. I wouldn't say that it's more realistic. I think that That's a prerogative of the governor to sort of set where he thinks those estimates are going to be and where he wants the spending to be, and I think that's traditionally what you've seen.
Clay, you walk that line quite adroitly. I salute you on how you handled that.
Yeah, Clay, that's very good. I believe that Governor Justice intentionally, when he would send the estimates to the legislature, intentionally underestimated what these different taxes would bring in, just so things would look really super rosy when they came in at the level that most people would have estimated they come in. I really think that, I think it's important to have these estimates be as close as they possibly can, so you can predict, which is one of the reasons I think that, and I argued this for years when I was in the legislature, and even when the Democrats were in the majority and they wouldn't listen to me. We're one of the few states where the legislature doesn't have the legal authority to at least challenge the estimates of the governor. Even most states have part-time legislatures, but they have the ability, both the practical and legal ability, to say to the governor, wait a minute, we think the severance tax is going to bring in X amount of money, not Y amount of money. And it becomes then a negotiation, and you try and you end up compromising. Our system simply gives absolute authority to the governor to do the estimating. I wish you guys would do something about it. And again, I'll plead guilty. We didn't do anything about it the 26 years I was in.
Well, I don't think Governor Justice intentionally set those things wrong. I would disagree with that assessment. I do think there was concern about how much federal dollars were flowing and where those impacts were ultimately coming and when they would ultimately stop. Because you can't control the federal government when you're in the state, and so I think they did take a conservative view of that and saying, man, if these dollars don't come in, this is where we're going to be. Now, they did come in, and I think that helped push some of those revenues higher than what they originally intended, probably significantly higher. As it relates to the independent estimate, I've often thought about that. I agree that it would be good to be able to have an independent estimate to have those discussions. In order to do that, you have to employ significantly more people at the legislature in the Fiscal Affairs Department to do that. I mean, I've looked at a couple different states in Wyoming and Utah and some of those states in South Dakota where they do have the ability to set that revenue. But in the end, I think West Virginia is just taking this approach because the executive branch is the one who has to function as the employer. And they're the ones who have to say, this is where we need to spend our money to support the citizens of West Virginia when what we need to do our job. And so I think that's where they set that estimate and where they set the original budgets. That's why the governor introduces the original budget before the House and the Senate take it up, because they're ultimately the employer and they're the ones who have to make sure that the government functions in an everyday basis because, like you said, we are a part-time legislature. Yeah,
but again, most of these other states are too that have that have that provision that the legislature can say, hey, wait a minute, we don't think these numbers look right. And remember, it's the legislature that has the power of the purse. You can't really exercise the power of the purse unless you have the ability to determine for yourself how much money is in the purse. And I actually don't think it would require that many more people added to legislative services. I think it could be done with maybe a 10 or 15% increase in the number of employees in legislative services.
Yeah, and I mean, whether the number's 10 or 15 or higher, I think that's, I don't disagree with you philosophically that it'd be nice to have that ability to look at it and say, yeah, I think we need to look at those estimates. But again, we ultimately defer that to the governor constitutionally.
And I think, and remember, before we had this, back in the 60s, but before what was called the modern budget amendment that gave the governor exclusive authority, the budget was decided on by the Board of Public Works. You had 6 different people, and the governor just had one vote, and they'd all have to agree on what the proposal that would go to the legislature. One of the weaknesses of the modern budget amendment was it took that decision-making authority away from a group of people, gave it to one person, but didn't have anybody else with the ability to be a real practical check on that one person.
So question I have, and John, you got a lot of experience in this area. So what, we're a couple months into the year, just finished our second month into, and so overall, and I think I heard you say, Clay, we were 17 million above estimate.
Correct.
So is this normal for July and August numbers?
If you
go ahead, Clay.
It really kind of is. I mean, if you go back and you look in fiscal year 24, I guess it was fiscal year 25, we were at 739 million in revenue, and I think right now we're at 785 million. So slightly ahead. If you go back to 23, we were at 745. Now it's down a little bit because we've taken personal income tax and we've reduced it by $27 million, or 27%, not $27 million. I apologize. 27%. So we expected a reduction in some of the personal income tax. When you used to look at the revenues, Bill, the personal income tax was a little bit higher percentage of our total budget. It used to run around 38, 39, maybe a little higher compared to our sales tax, and now they've kind of equalized out. And if you look now, the sales tax estimates are actually a little higher than the personal income tax. So to answer your question, yeah, that's pretty about normal where we are.
So we're in a new administration, so I'm not sure there's a whole lot of validity to the fact that, did Justice underestimate, so it made him look better versus Morrissey. So
well, but we had 8 years of Justice as governor.
We did,
yeah,
but I think we're on the same track. If we're showing 2 months in that we're 17 million above estimate, it looks good.
Oh, okay, and you might be right. Yeah, the difference is you can't just go from the first 2 months.
Correct.
As to see let's get to the end of the fiscal year and see how close Governor Morrissey's estimates were to what actually ended up coming in. Mm-hmm. And then I think we can have a more meaningful discussion about this.
Clay, are we still doing what you guys used to call flatline budgeting back in the last governor's term? Yeah,
I mean, I think it's still the approach of the legislature to try to I don't want to say minimize, but to appropriately allocate funds and try to keep it as flat as possible. I mean, you're going to have inflationary costs, and you've seen some of that. We had some increases last year in the Department of Human Services for foster care and adoption services over policies that we put into place, over paying a little bit more and things that we anticipated. So we are still making some increases in the areas that are necessary, but we're still trying to hold that flat line as much as possible, Rob.
I think flat level funding is good if you're funded adequately to start off with. But if you have agencies that's underfunded, that they're short on staff because they don't have the dollars to be able to hire the staff to take on the needs that are there, at that point you're not helping yourself any. So the flat level funding at that point doesn't work real well.
And I agree with that, Bill, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think this legislature, and you see it, and it was new to me when I came in years ago, as to why we had so many budget hearings. And you brought in the agencies, and there's been people who've said, oh, well, we should do away with these agency budget hearings. But to me, they're one of the most important meetings that I have on the entire year, because I get to ask those opportunities. Are you adequately staffed? What are your full-time equivalencies? What are your open positions? And we're funding their full FTEs. Now, they have the ability to move 5% within their line items, so if something pops up. But it's an opportunity for every member of the Finance Committee, the House and the Senate independently hold these hearings, to really dig in and ask those questions about changes in policies or needs, or where were their shortcomings in the past year. And you see that, or where are there improvements that they're asking for. And you see that those budget hearings are, I don't want to say they are pretty intense, and it's not in a bad way. It's just making sure that we have the understanding of what those agencies are experiencing every day to make sure that they are adequately funded. And sometimes they'll tell you, we are not adequately funded and we need this improvement. And we've seen that, like I said, we saw that within the foster care and the adoption agencies and the rates that we're paying. And so you saw some increases in supplementals, and you've seen a larger budget this year because of that. So I think those are really critical to the success of the whole budgeting process, Bill.
Do you actually have agencies that come to those hearings and say, "Hey, we're budgeted adequately. I have all the staff we need. We don't need anything additional"?
Correct. Yes.
You probably don't hear that.
That is normally a question that do you have the adequate funding in order to fulfill the needs of the citizens of the state of West Virginia is a normal question that will get asked of every agency.
Delegate Clay Riley is our guest. He is the Vice Chair of Finance in the House. Is PEIA at the moment the biggest stressor to the state's fiscal health, Clay?
I don't think so. I think it's a combination of everything. Being an employer is hard. I mean, when you run a business, and that's what the state government is you have to look across the board at all the needs. So whether it's PEIA, whether it's dealing with Hope Scholarship, whether it's dealing with wages, whether it's dealing with anything. I mean, I think everything that you deal with in the state is a stressor, and you can't really point to one thing. Dollars and how many dollars impact it, but you still have, medical inflation is a national issue that you got to deal with. So that is a stressor that I would say is nationwide, whether it's a government or a private industry. But there's also workforce and retention and making sure that you do all those things. So I kind of look at them holistically and not any one single thing, Rob. But it's something that you have to pay attention to because it's a national health care issue. You
mentioned Hope Scholarship and the projections for the amount of money that will be flowing in toward Hope Scholarship over the next 2 years was something that's caught the attention of a lot of people, including Governor Morrissey in his early days in office. And what have those numbers borne out to be as of late? Clay, I don't need an exact amount, just kind of an increase in that.
I think you're looking at an additional $100 million increase coming in next year, at least is what the projections show at this point. We'll watch that and see how many people enroll. I mean, one of the things you got to remember is that I think we've had children who have been of the school age who've just not been funded historically. And when you look at it, just because they're in public school or whether they're in private school or whether they're homeschooled, I think we have a responsibility as a legislature and a state to fund all children. And so I think that's where, all those are stressors that you have to pay attention to and figure out when they're coming in and how you can manage those. So, but that's the latest projection that I've heard.
Are you guys going to have a special session next week?
We regularly have special sessions during interims, and John, as you know, that they get called regularly. Sometimes they get called hours in advance. Sometimes they get called weeks in advance. So it's not uncommon for us to have them in August, September, October, November. I mean, you've been there. So if one gets called, one gets called. I'm not sure at this point, but I know there's been some discussions, and so we'll see what happens over the next few days.
So you don't know yet whether you'll have one?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Unless there's been a release of a call for a special session in the last 30 minutes, I don't know.
Well, if there is, I haven't seen it, but I've been sitting here in the studio. So,
but I think
I've been talking to you.
Yeah,
but I think there's still some desire, I guess, on the governor's level to be able to talk about the PEIA situation during a special session. Is that correct?
Well, my understanding is, and from the statements that the governor has made publicly, is that he wants to make some modifications to PEIA, and that his team has been working on some proposals of which they think will help the operations and the finances of PEIA. So those are pretty public statements that he's made, and he's said that. I think in the end, he has to get to a point of, if he does call a special session, there's going to be a bill that he's going to have to introduce of what that looks like. I don't know the status of that, but his public statements are, hey, I think he's talked a little bit about a fraud unit publicly. So those are things that you hear in the PBMs and those sort of things. And, some of those things I think absolutely are good things. And so I think that's pretty important.
I've also heard that he might want to put certificate of need on the call for a special session. What do you think about that? Do you think he might do that?
I've not heard that. I think that the legislature took that up in the health committee took that up in this past legislative session. So I've not heard that at all.
Okay.
In regards to anything that is on a special session agenda, John, you've been there. Clay, you are there now. I would presume, as somebody who's outside of that circle, that nothing would be on that agenda unless the votes have already been whipped before you get there, or it's very close, Clay, because nobody would want to call a special session to have something fail.
If that's a question, I wouldn't. I would say that there's a lot of conversations that occur about whether there's support for certain aspects of policy, and those don't always mean that the conversations are around the actual correct way that it comes out. I mean, I remember a special session a couple years ago where there was, you heard the rumors of, hey, we're gonna fix this or make this modification, and when it actually came out, it was something a little bit different than I anticipated. So, and I was new, and so I had never been there before. So I think in the end, those conversations there's a lot of conversations among senators and delegates, and sometimes it's accurate and sometimes it's not exactly the way it reads. There's more foundational information until you actually see what the proposal is on paper. It's really hard to make those assessments. So there may be conversations, and you said whip. They may whip. What do you feel like in principle that taking care of a Medicaid fraud or a fraud unit, a PIA fraud unit would be good. Well, if it saves us money and prevents fraud, yeah, that's a good concept. So
we have about 2 minutes left. Do you have a question, John?
Well, but here's the thing, Clay. And I agree with that a fraud unit is a good idea. But does that fix the problem? I don't think so. The problem is multifaceted.
Well, just because it doesn't fix, in the term that you used was fix the problem, I would say it would fix a problem. And that when you talk about multifaceted issues, and it depends on how you define fix.
Well, I would say it would fix part of the problem.
Well, and it depends on how you define fix and how you define the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said earlier, this is a medical inflation issue that's a national issue. And you have healthcare that's going up because of the specialty drugs. You do probably have some, I would assume with every government program, there's some level of fraud. So anything we can do to improve, I think we should improve.
No, and I agree with that. I agree with that.
And so, see, and Democrats and Republicans are agreeing right there. on WRNR, we are making progress.
Yeah, baby. Clay, I've got about a minute left. In regards to the microgrid bill that you were involved in passing and data centers, do we have any that are actively up and running anytime in the near future in the state?
There are a lot of inquiries and a lot of discussions about where they can locate, where power is available. Some don't want microgrids. Some want to talk microgrids. But they are looking, and I'll say this, most of the ones that I've spoken with, and I had a call with a major one 2 days ago, who said, we want to do it right. We want to be good community members. So they are doing the groundwork. And so, yes, I've seen significant increase since we've passed that piece of legislation. I think you're going to continue to see, because it's a national movement, and I think we're putting ourselves into the game. Now, if we can play the game well and win and score a few runs, I think that's important.
Like a good baseball analogy. Clay, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Hey, guys, you have a great one. Thanks for having me.
You too, Clay.
See ya.
Delegate Clay Riley, Vice Chair of Finance in the House, as we stop halfway through this second hour of the